You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
Welcome to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show. I'm your co-host, Alyssa Lotmore. I have two guests with us today, and we're so excited to welcome them as I talk about citizen action. Emily Connor is an MSW student at UAlbany. Currently, she is interning at a mental health clinic. Her internship during her undergraduate career at United Tenants of Albany sparked a passion for systematic reform that is carried on throughout her graduate career. She has been coordinating with Citizen Action with the goal of establishing a student volunteer group. She hopes this group will bridge the gap between micro and macro students, showing the importance of unity and a drive for social change. Samantha Rini is the Political Education Program Manager at Citizen Action of New York. She is also a licensed social worker and is an alum of the UAlbany School of Social Welfare, graduated in 2018. Samantha has been working at Citizen Action for 6 months in this new program where the major goal is to shift the narrative about income inequality in our society and that racial justice is economic justice. She knows we must move forward through collective activism that calls out racial capitalism and its societal impacts in communities and relationships. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to start off about what is Citizen Action of New York. I mean, I've heard a little bit, but I really don't know all that it does.
Yeah. So Citizen Action of New York is a grassroots membership organization that spans New York State. All the way from New York City to Buffalo, Capital District, Utica, so all over the place. We fight for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice and battle against the forces of racial capitalism. And through our approaches with issue work, we look at a trajectory of structural reforms. So we take on issues that impact people's lives every day, while we try to create the political and ideological environment for transformational change, to build a world full of opportunity, love, respect, and dignity. And we've been working, Citizen Action's been established for 30 years now, and just continues to fight against, again, racial capitalism and building a new world.
So, Samantha, let me ask then, what attracted you to this organization? Before we go into a little bit more,
yeah.
You've mentioned all this. What was it that stood out to you, and did you know a lot about it before you began working there?
I didn't know a lot about it. So I came here to the School of Social Welfare, and I took the macro concentration. I loved the idea of systematic change, and it especially was influenced by my past work within the child welfare system and doing direct service and recognizing the need for structural change. And then I actually interned with them in a direct service position, working to implement and strengthen the immigrant population within the Capital District. So just building resources and creating maps for immigrants to find those specific services they may need. But I also was able to lobby and work on campaigns and see how the direct service is impacted by political and policy change. And with my macro systematic perspective, it just blew my mind, and I knew I didn't want to be anywhere else. So I volunteered with Citizen Action a lot. I went on a lot of lobby days. And then this political education program started, and that has a lot to do with Citizen Action had a lot of big wins last year. So they got a lot of new funders and supporters. So they decided to finally be able to put energy and funds into political education. And I also had a background of doing research here with Dr. Heather Larkin on building curriculum and trainings around ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. So now my new job is around implementing training and curriculum, but with a systematic approach. So it felt kind of serendipitous, and it's been great.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows a lot that sometimes what we do as an internship, even if we aren't familiar with an agency before the hand, it can sort of stick with us.
Absolutely.
So As we move on to talking a little bit more about citizen action, I wanted to jump over to you, Emily, and kind of ask, how did you become involved with citizen action?
Yeah, I went to a reversing inequality training that Sam actually put on with Citizen Action. It was sort of advertised to some of the macro classes, and my friend in the macro track, I'm in the micro track at the School of Social Welfare, she told me about it because she knows that's sort of right up my alley with my interests. And so we went to that training, and at that training we were kind of hooked because, especially as a micro student, sometimes I tend to miss out on more of the discussions around like systematic reform. And so going there and being able to be involved and just it sort of refreshed my mind about, the things that I'm passionate about, and this campaign that I really wanted to get involved in ever since I heard about it at that training.
So it's sort of open then to, you don't have to be a social worker, am I correct?
Correct.
You don't have to be a social worker, and you can be somebody who's interested in more micro type, more that clinical, because it's still, this is a topic area where you're doing advocacy that affects everyone, whether you're working directly with clients or where you do advocacy every day, it crosses all lines.
Absolutely.
So what was the motivation behind this demand justice issue that Citizen Action is tackling now?
Yeah, so we have this campaign. It's called Demand Justice. It's been going on for several months and will be continuing to go forward for 2020. It's an umbrella for our work to end mass incarceration, mass criminalization, and the school-to-prison pipeline, while we also hold district attorneys accountable and advance human first language. So it's not a one-issue campaign. It's more of that, like I said, umbrella that encapsulates all the things that we need to do, and it focuses on 3 points. That's transforming the justice system, building human first language, and investing in schools, not jails. We knew that at Citizen Action, we need to end mass incarceration and criminalization, and that means to transform the justice system and repair the harm done to communities by investing in schools, because we all know, I think especially as social workers, that the school-to-prison pipeline is almost the telltale sign of a child going into the incarceration system. So we wanted to address it from all angles and build that perspective to not only be fighting one issue, but to be shifting the ideology around the justice system and what it can look like.
Okay. And do each year you switch issues before? But I know in 2019 there were some wins with bail reform. Was that the focus of a certain year, or do you tackle these issues all the time? And can you go a little bit into about the bail reform?
Yeah, we tackle issues that are impacted by individuals and members in the most marginalized in communities. We try to focus on working with Black, Brown, and low-income communities because we know that those are the most divested in and not the least safe spaces, I'd say. So the pre-trial package and the bail reform wins, they were separate essentially from demand justice's focus, but they were all encapsulated under our civil rights campaign. Erin George is our statewide civil rights campaign director, and Cleanna Lightborn is the statewide civil rights organizer, and they worked around the clock with so many other community and coalition members, like Vocal New York and Make Communities for Change, New York Communities for Change, and so many other organizations we work with to create a pre-trial package that would end mass incarceration, or at least put a dent in mass incarceration in New York State. We won on bail, discovery, and speedy trial, and those are critical steps toward ending mass incarceration and begin to roll back the rampant discrimination of pretrial system designed to decimate communities of color, because people are no longer blindfolded to evidence against them, and jails across the state will shrink and countless lives will be saved due to the pretrial package that we won. And I can go into it further. I don't know if I should dive right into it, but for 2020 we need to continuously just reinforce them, so they'll be a part of their defending them will be a part of the demand justice, but it's not necessarily what we're fighting for, because we already won.
So for 2020 is a big year. I know there's probably things that you guys want to tackle in that and ways to move forward. Tell us a little bit about those, what you're hoping to accomplish in 2020, and also incorporate if people want to be involved. Like if someone like Emily was like, I want to be involved in this, what can they expect?
Well, I'll kind of dive into the three components of demand justice. So transforming the justice system was the largest component, and for 2020, it's around, continuously holding district attorneys and accountable, because in New York State, if New York were a country, it would be the 6th highest incarceration rate in the world. So when district attorneys are unchecked in power because we vote them in and they don't have many people above them, they have, if they're not committed to community, instead they're committed to conviction rates, they don't address root causes of harm, and they just put people behind bars, we're going to see higher rates, right? Like we're going to see the consistent rates that we've seen. So just always knowing who your district attorney is, and maybe scheduling an appointment with them and seeing where they feel, what their feelings are about this package and transforming the justice system, how they feel about restorative justice and how they're going to implement that, is a really great way that anybody can get involved. And we actually have a toolkit at citizenactionny.org, where it's a demand justice toolkit that if you click on, you can see all of these ways that you can promote demand justice, and you can promote ending the school to prison pipeline and all these components.
So there are ways that individuals can be involved, even if it's through like using this toolkit and saying, well, here's some ways that I can do this on my own to sort of promote and advocate.
Absolutely. It has social media posts if you want to post something on it. It has hashtags that you can share. It has different organizations that you can connect with. And we also meet on Tuesdays at the Citizen Action office at 94 Central for a demand justice meeting to continuously build power and prepare for actions or plan actions and strategy. But one way, aside from the transforming the justice system, we also have human first language as a component of demand justice, and I think that really speaks to the micro component of how we live every day in our lives, because this human first language campaign was promoted and in support of the Center for New Leadership of Urban Solutions, which is an organization built off of individuals who are formerly incarcerated. Eddie Ellis was the founder. And so at Citizen Action, we committed to a letter that they had sent out, and we amplified about using language and how it's deeply impactful. And society's current way of discussing the justice system and justice-involved people is one that promotes mass incarceration and is rooted in racism. So part of transforming that and transforming our ideological component is to stop using dehumanizing language. Stop saying convict, criminal, felon, and explaining people as an offender or parolee, and instead saying, an incarcerated person or formerly incarcerated or a person that has been involved in the justice system. And you'll notice that I don't say criminal justice system, because that word in general I think is so racially charged and is so dehumanizing that we lose the impact of the whole person when we use those words. And that's one of those components of demand justice that we'll be using in 2020 also to amplify just bringing humanity back into the world.
Now, in addition to policy change, talking to district attorneys and things like that, do you, as we talk about like the language changes, do you talk to the general community too? How do you get your message out about, because maybe somebody didn't even think of that. I'm just talking to someone.
Absolutely.
How do you get your message out to the general community about here's some things that we do and how you can help as well?
Well, for my position is to hold community forums and community workshops. So that's one huge component, is to continuously use the correct language, the humanizing language, and have spaces where we acknowledge that on a regular basis. Amy Jones, who's the community organizer in Albany and has been doing a lot of work to promote human first language and demand justice in general. She's been connecting with forums, going to anywhere that invites her and has relation to the justice system to discuss how we need to build communities and promote that human first language.
So what are some things that social workers can do?
Do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in just thinking about the human first language, that's been something that has been emphasized, at least for me, through my curriculum, is person first language and the importance of language for us social workers to use, but it doesn't mean that we're perfect all the time. And I think the sort of role as social workers as educators can be lost a little bit sometimes, just like the role of social workers as change agents can sort of be left aside sometimes. So I think even just bringing into even micro spaces to say, like, this is why we think human first language is important, and why it is important, and the language that we choose to use. So for me, I'm at a mental health clinic, and it's a very micro setting. We do one-on-one therapy, but of course these issues still come up there because, as we know, macro concepts impact the micro work as well. So even just being that voice in those spaces to say, hey, like, instead of saying inmate or criminal, like, this is why we should use person first language. And then I think just in general, too, with the Demand Justice campaign and with the issues that we're talking about with the justice system and mass incarceration, I think social work, from what I've seen being a micro student, has sort of moved away a little bit from social change. And that's something Sam and I were talking about, the difference between social work and social change. So it's really easy to go to school, get your degree, sort of find a job you're comfortable at, and there's a real fine line between that and complacency in a system that's not serving the individuals you're working with very well, and putting them in a lot of positions of being at a disadvantage. So I think even on that more general outlook, moving kind of towards social change and making sure that we are being kind of at the forefront of the discussions, policy discussions surrounding things like the bail reform. And then as students too, I think this is something that we can be really interested in. When I first heard of Citizen Action and the Demand Justice campaign, I was just really excited to get involved with something that I felt really connected my experience as a student and my curriculum with real world sort of things that are happening. And kind of taking charge of the fact that this is my community now. And I think that's something that can get lost for social work students that, I've been in Albany I'm not originally from Albany, but I've been in Albany for years now. So kind of taking advantage of the fact that we're so close to the Capitol and so close to the possibility for social change, that even just as students getting involved with the campaign, I think is a great opportunity.
And to those who want to be involved, whether you're a social work student or someone from the community who hears this and says, I want to do more, do you have to have a background in social work, not the degree, but do you have to have certain qualifications in order to say, well, I want to be able to go advocate? What do you need to do to become a volunteer or to learn about how to be able to be most effective?
I think you just need to, you can connect with me. My email is srini@citizenactionny.org, or Citizen Action in general. You don't need any credentials, any background, anything specific. If you see that there's change that needs to be done in the world, which I think that there is a lot, that we can find the right space. We have some members and volunteers who work in research, so they do some research for us in terms of demand justice and Or, you know, if you're an artistic person and building flyers or signage is your thing, like that's always needed for our actions and for promotion. So there's ways that anybody can come in and bring their skills, their talents, their thoughts, and their passion in and just build the work. I do want to mention in terms of the social workers, the third component of the demand justice is schools, not jails. And I think that that's like a really interesting component for social workers since we're so involved in school systems. And that's often one of the places that we may end up working in. So the schools, not jails, I just want to mention is that that too often Black, brown, and low-income students attend schools that are underfunded, under-resourced, and over-policed. And as a part of demand justice, we just want schools to be fully funded, which there is current a foundation aid that's implemented that's found but hasn't been implemented, and we need to implement it in 2020. And that's over $4 billion is what's owed to New York State school systems. And I just wanted to mention this recent action about Rochester schools and how halfway through the year, about 2 weeks ago, over 125 teachers and aides got pink slips, so they won't be able to go back to work after the holiday break. So what that means for social workers and how do we fight to maintain counselors in schools as opposed to maybe how school systems sometimes invest in cops over counselors. So how social workers need to kind of advocate for their students in the terms of how we need to have trauma-informed practice in our school systems and culturally responsive curriculums too, and how we need to always amplify the fact that what's happening in Rochester may happen everywhere if we're not investing in our schools enough. And it means that teachers aren't having jobs, so kids are losing their main source of connection in their school system right away. And I think that as advocates, social workers can really speak to that component of demand justice.
So there seems to be no shortage of things that people can do to be involved.
Absolutely.
No matter what your skill set is, there's always something, a skill that you have that could in some way help move the demand justice mission forward.
Absolutely, definitely. We're having some lobby days in the near future, which I could maybe share or post with just a list of them. But two are specifically working around ending mass incarceration, and one is Halt Solitary, so a group that's trying to bring an end to solitary confinement, and because we all know what that does to an individual psyche. And I think that one will be the 21st of January. So if anybody wanted to connect with that, they could let me know, and then I could find a role for them for that day. Lobbying, a lot of times it's hundreds of people that come to the Capitol to meet with specific members of the legislature. So there needs to be people to guide them and show them where to go, as well as some people to use their voice in those meetings. So there's a lot of ways people can get involved.
Okay. Is there anything else either of you would like to share as we wrap up, just about citizen action or demand justice, or anything that you hope people will take from this interview?
I think one thing is that it can be really intimidating and kind of overwhelming to hear, especially if you don't kind of already have a background knowledge of some of these issues. It seems like, like somebody who maybe isn't a social worker might be asking themselves, like, what can I do in this sort of movement, or like what could I bring? And I think part of it is just showing up. Even when I went to the first training for reversing inequality, I was like blown away. And I really didn't have any previous knowledge about like the district attorneys and the sort of goals of the demand justice campaign, but that's half of it, is kind of showing up and being willing to learn and exactly see what skills you can kind of bring. So I just kind of want to put that in there too, that although it's intimidating, I think that, there's a lot that can be learned.
Well, Well, I think that's an important thing that you just mentioned, is that you can learn new skills, because it
Yeah.
does. Even as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't even know. As a social worker, there were some things that you were mentioning that I was like, well, I never even did that as a student intern or even in my career. But there are ways that we can still learn, and you just have to take that first step to be involved. And there are resources. It seems like your organization has a lot of people to train and to inform individuals who are interested in being a part of this, being a part of something bigger.
Absolutely. We're always willing to train any volunteer or member. We are a membership organization, so those who would like to donate or become a member could always have, a sustaining membership fee. But people can also connect on social media, which is at Citizen Action NY, if you'd like updates. But you could also text 83224, or no, you text the word action to 83224, and you'll get updates on what Citizen Action is doing. But again, just because maybe being involved and seeing our actions and seeing our social media might be a nice introduction to the work. It might comfort people into maybe showing up as the next step.
Well, I think that you guys are doing a lot of great things, and I want to thank you for coming on, because you have to get your message out there, and there are individuals who might have always wanted to be involved in something like this, but never knew what resources. It can be overwhelming when there's so much out there, you don't know where to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you coming on here and just giving an overview and saying, here's how you can be involved. And at any level you want. Maybe it's just looking at our post right now. Maybe it's coming to a meeting. Maybe it's jumping in at one of the lobby days that you're talking about. There are many different ways that can reach people at their comfort level, and then they can move and progress forward.
Yeah, and I think that we all just need to remember that we're all impacted by by this racial capitalist perspective. It does obviously impact Black, brown, and low income communities, but fighting for justice is a job that's for everybody.
So I want to thank you for being on. Again, we were with Emily Connor, who is an MSW student here at the UAlbany School of Social Welfare. She's been coordinating with Citizen Action with the goal of establishing a student volunteer group, and she hopes that this group will bridge the gap between micro and macro students, showing the importance of unity and a drive for social change. And we also are with Samantha Rini, who is an alum of the University at Albany School of Social Welfare, and she's the Political Education Program Manager at Citizen Action of New York. And she's been working at Citizen Action for the past 6 months in this new program where the major goal is to shift the narrative about income inequality in our society, and that racial justice is economic justice. So I want to thank you both for being on and getting this message out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.